My name is Jason, and I work a pretty typical ranch job in southern Montana that borders the Crow Reservation. Wake up every day, saddle a horse, and make sure you have everything you need for the job. Whether it's fencing, sorting, collecting, or whatever the foreman tells you to do, honestly. I arrived in Montana in late May and have fallen in love. I came from the eastern Missouri and never really knew what the mountains had to offer. Both good and ungodly. I never really bought into anything supernatural. I just thought that the stories the wrangler named Willie, who hailed from the Crow tribe, were a complete fallacy, made to cover years and years of mistreatment, discrimination, and murder by the early European settlers. On this fateful day, we were riding out to find a bear who had been terrorizing our cattle. So naturally, what I brought that day was my .45 long Colt single-action revolver and my Henry .45-75, and of course camping supplies, since it may take us a few days. For those that don't know, a .45-70 is considered to be a small elephant gun, and while we weren't hunting elephants, I figured it'd be big enough for a grizzly. As far as the .45 long Colt single-action revolver, well, 2 guns is better than 1, and the .45 long Colt is a very large pistol, so it has a chance to get any animal. Willie and I rode out around 10 AM since it was about a 4-hour ride to the northeastern part of the ranch, where we thought the bear was. Along the way, while Willie and I were talking, he starts telling me stories of things he'd seen in the mountains since he grew up not far away. "These mountains, man, they make my skin crawl," said Willie. "Bullshit, man. All those stories are fake, fallacies. I mean creatures that can mimic any sound they hear to lure you in and kill you. Come on, stop trying to scare me," I said. "I wouldn't talk like that if I were you." "They'll hear you," said Willie. "Yeah, man. Whatever. Let's just get this done," I said. I'll admit, these stories he told me did make my stomach drop with the amount of detail he had in them. It was rather impressive. He could make a killing as scary as a story writer. 3.5 hours into our ride, I had to stop to, well, let's just say the Browns were running down the tunnel. Willie kept riding. Something in cowboy culture that is considered insanely rude, but I understood. He wanted to get there and get this done. No one liked killing a bear, but it was messing with our livelihood, and we were responsible for these cows' lives. When I was finishing up, I hear Willie further up the trail scream, "What the fuck is that?" I quickly untie my horse and draw my .45 LC, and ride like hell to go save my friend. When I came up to him, it was like he'd seen a ghost. I asked him, "Willie, what's going on? Are you okay?" But Willie didn't answer. He had a 1,000-yard stare about him and was mumbling something to himself in his native language I obviously didn't understand. Before I could ask him what he was saying, I looked down at about 20 feet in front of him, and my breakfast almost came up from what I saw. Laying there was what looked like one of our most prized heifers, completely, well, just completely decimated. Strangely, though, there was not a single drop of blood anywhere around her. I holster my pistol and pull out my rifle. At that moment, I look at Willie and say, "Dude, what the fuck? Pull your gun out, the bear's about." In the coldest and most emotionless voice I have ever heard, he says, while still staring nowhere in particular, "That wasn't a bear. We shouldn't be here." I respond, "Man, this bear is about. Let's set up camp here and get searching. The boss will kill us." "You don't understand, Jason. This isn't the work of a bear. This is the work of an Aitseweyo. Willie, English, please." He then coldly turns to me and says, "Skinwalker." "Willie, they aren't real. Cowboy the fuck up and let's kill a bear." That line lit a fire under Willie, who was desperate to prove he could out-cowboy anybody and everybody. I used this to my advantage several times in the short amount of time we'd lived together. We set up camp quickly and made it around the surrounding woods to track this bear. This is when it all started. When we were pretty far from camp, Willie went east a bit to hang a piss. Before he left, he said, "Hey Jason, don't go too far. I responded, Yeah, man. Just hurry up. While I'm sitting there on a stump, checking my rifle, I hear Willie off to the west say, Jason? I was confused because I swear Willie had gone to the east, but I figured maybe he went around to mess with me. I said back, Hurry the fuck up, man, we got shit we need to do. As I said, this Willie comes walking back from the east and looks at me puzzled. Jason, who are you talking to? What do you mean? I'm talking to... Never mind. Figuring my mind was playing tricks on me since we were alone in the mountains, and stuff like that isn't out of the ordinary. We continue on our hunt as dusk begins to set in, and for the last 30 minutes I couldn't help but thinking we were being watched. I looked at Willie once with a concerned look, and he says, I feel it too. As dusk starts turning into night, we decided to head back to camp, but neither of us could shake the feeling something was out there, stalking us. I assumed it was just a cougar or even the bear we were after, since cougars especially stalk their potential prey before they strike. As we get back to camp, we start a fire and start roasting a rabbit I had shot earlier in the day for supper, along with some beans, a cowboy staple. Willie and I were just sitting around the fire talking about life and all manner of things, until I feel a churning in my gut. Knowing what that means, I take some of the dude wipes I'd brought along and a trash bag to throw them in when I was done, as well as my .45 LC just in case something wanted to fuck around and find out. I waddle off the south down a slight hill so Willie won't be able to see me or even mess with me, because that is one thing he loved to do. It was pitch black at this point, so I can't see anything other than the stars, and what was lit dimly by the moonlight. I'm trying to make it quick because, ever since earlier, I still hadn't shaken the feeling we were being followed and watched. Even now, hence the .45. I'm staring up at the stars when all of a sudden I hear something about 30 feet in front of me, rustling in the trees. It sounded big. As I look over, in the direction, trying to make out what it was over there, it was so damn dark. However, I could tell, whatever it was, watching me. A few seconds pass. By then I realized something. All the sound in the forest had stopped. As any experienced outdoorsman knows, when this happens, there is a predator around. So I draw my pistol and pull the hammer back, when I hear it. Jason, hurry up, I found it! Coming from in front of me. I fire a shot into the ground because I now knew it was Willie messing with me, so I figured I'd give him a better scare. I don't get even. I get ahead. I heard Willie running off into the woods, so I start to get up to chase him when all of a sudden I hear running coming up from behind me, right as I get my pants up. I cock my pistol back again, ready for whatever is coming. I move up the hill to confront whatever it was, and as I start the crest of the hill, I hear Willie screaming and running towards me, rifle in hand. Jason! Jason! Dude, Jason, are you okay? At the sight of this, I completely lose it, breaking into a ball on the ground, pistol in hand. Willie, I say, voice quivering. It was you. I heard you in the woods earlier in the east, and I heard you in the woods just in front of me. What is going on? He looks at me, puzzled. Jason, I did go off to the east earlier, and I was sitting by the fire when I heard the gunshot, so I figured... At that moment, we both heard it, coming from the bottom of the hill in my voice. Willie, I got it! I looked to see what the fuck it was I just heard that could mimic me so well, when Willie pulls me to the ground in a crouching position. Now, a look of pure fear and seriousness plastered on his face. He looked at me and said one phrase. I'd swear. I didn't need to be a native to remember or know what that meant, so I said in a hushed voice, No, that's impossible, they aren't real. Logic still trying to get control of my brain, Willie looks at me and in a whisper responds, You need to forget everything you know about these mountains, right now. A grizzly is the least of our worries. As he said this, he motioned for us to go back to camp. We made it back to camp shortly after. Willie was pacing around and praying in his native tongue. I have never felt so helpless in my life. So little. As I stare at the fire and contemplate what it all meant, I have one question burning in my mind. Can we kill it? Willie looks at me and says, "Not even a howitzer could take this thing down, Jason. These creatures are witches, beings of power your European blood could never grasp. I told you we shouldn't be here, and now the odds are that we die tonight, and they're not exactly in our favor. Why don't we just leave? I mean, we packed light. The trail is clear-cut and mostly pasture. That is the worst thing we can do. The only thing protecting us right now is the fire. They don't like light. If we were to pack up and leave, us and our nags would be dead before we even were in the saddle. We have to survive till morning. Only then do we stand half a chance. What are our odds, man? 20-80, not in our favor." I shivered at this, thinking about all the things I'd never gotten to do, when all of a sudden I looked up at Willie, who was staring into the woods. I tracked his gaze and immediately saw what he was looking at. There, at the edge of the clearing, where we'd made camp, were two glowing eyes. Except they weren't on the ground. They were at least halfway up the aspen tree it was standing by. I couldn't believe it. The thing in the woods had to be at least 10 feet tall. I screamed and Willie shot a terrified look my way. We locked eyes, looked back, and the thing was standing 15 feet from the campsite. I didn't think, and I pulled my rifle, loaded a round and fired. The thing stumbled backwards and then just stood up and smiled. It was then that I took a second to really look at the creature. 10 feet tall, with long arms that went down to its knees and razor-sharp talons. Willie looks at me and screams, "What have you done? You've killed us!" In the blink of an eye, I see the thing's talons rip through the center of his chest and hoist him up. Blood is everywhere. More blood than I've ever seen in my life. A smile was still painted across the thing's face. I could tell it wasn't doing this for the hunt. It was doing this because he liked it. The thing dropped Willie to the ground and disappeared into the night. I ran over to Willie, who was still breathing, but just barely. He looked at me and said, "You won't survive the night. Run." With those words, he coughed up a mouthful of blood and took his last breath. I grabbed my guns and a lantern and hightailed it back southwest towards the bunkhouse. I was about a mile away from the camp when behind me I heard the most awful thing I ever had in my life. A mix of a stereotypical demon as well as Willie called out to me and said, "Don't run, Jason. You won't get far." I turned around and fired one shot into the night and instantly knew I hit my mark when I heard a howl that sent a shiver down my spine. But I kept running. 2 miles from the bunkhouse, I hear loud footsteps behind me and I turn around to see the thing charging me, but it was too late. I feel his claw sink into my left thigh and then pull out. I stumble and drop my rifle but keep going. I know he hit the artery. Blood is spewing out of my leg. I turn around and the beast isn't there. So I dart off the trail to the left. I tear my shirt and find a sturdy stick and fashion a makeshift tourniquet. Those bushcraft shows really came in handy. When I finally suffer the pain of tightening the tourniquet, I press on, much slower than I had been. I eventually make it back to the bunkhouse and fall into my bed after calling 911, but they're at least 2 hours away. My leg is still bleeding, and I can hear it outside, lurking, waiting for his chance to strike. I enrolled in a new school recently, and my first day is just tomorrow. I was getting excited until the principal sent me an email. It was titled First Day Rules. I opened them intrigued to see how much they differed from my old school, if I could chew gum or leave at lunchtimes to get my own food. But no, these rules were completely different. The email went, "Good morning. It has come to my attention that it is your first day tomorrow, and I can't wait to welcome you here. But our school has a different set of rules for day one as it does any other. Do not try to use a map to find your classes. You will get lost. Instead, follow the student in the green hat. He is your guide for the day. The student in the green hat will never talk to you, and you should never talk to him if you want to make it past this day. You don't want to know what happened to the last outgoing student. You are fine to talk to any other students, but if they try to talk to you about the tomorrow, run. Do not trust your eyes. If you see something odd in your peripheral vision, then it isn't actually there. If the walls start to bleed, notify the janitor. He can be found next to the grandfather clock. When in class, sometimes the teacher might tell you to wait on them outside. Take your stuff and walk out. But if the hallway seems off, go to the classroom next door because you didn't follow Rule 1 properly. Hopefully, after you have changed classrooms, you will be fine. But sadly, the majority of time you still aren't. The only way to guarantee safety is to check the clock on the wall. If it has the numbers 1 to 12 on it, then you're fine. But if it has any different array of numbers, then inform the teacher, and if you are lucky, they will change the clock. Lunch will be served as a nice hot soup and a chocolate bar. But when you sit down, it will change. No matter what it changes to, if you value your eyesight, eat it all before lunch ends. As soon as 8th period starts, you want to run from the student with the green hat. This period is a game of hide and seek. He will give you a 5-minute head start, and you don't want to find out what happens if you lose. As soon as the final bell rings, do not rush to the same door you used to get into the building. Instead, find the nearest window and jump out. No matter the height, you will probably be fine. If you follow these rules, then you will be safe to come in for a normal day too. Remember, I am not in on the first day, so do not trust anyone who claims to be me, and do not show anyone these rules. Good luck. I couldn't get to sleep that night. I thought about telling my parents, but I didn't want to know what happened if I disobeyed the rules. I thought of emailing the principal back, asking if this was some sort of sick joke, but at this point I was too tired and managed to grab a couple of hours sleep. I woke up to my dad shouting for me. I slept through my alarm and only had 20 minutes to get ready. I showered, brushed my teeth, got dressed and ate my breakfast just in time for the school bus to arrive. I got on the bus, put my headphones in, and kept to myself on the way to school. Everything seemed normal for now. I got off a surprisingly quick bus journey for the distance and walked to the gate. I took a step inside and felt a shiver run down my spine. This is it, I thought to myself as I walked inside the halls. Then I saw him. The man with the green hat. I knew the principal wasn't joking now. He was about 7 foot tall and smelt like candy apples. I heard the bell ring and that's when he started to move. He walked with purpose like he knew I was following even though he hadn't seen me. I made it to the first class in one piece. I sat down at the back as to not be noticed, but as soon as I sat, some friendly-looking boy with baby blue eyes next to me struck up a conversation. I remembered I was allowed to talk to people, so I talked to this charismatic man about my interests and what school I came from. We talked until the end of the period, and he made me think the principal was joking, until he turns to me as the bell rang and asked, "What do you know about the tomorrow?" His smile distorted to show rows of teeth. He grew in size, almost to try and block me from escaping. I looked around for help, but everyone didn't seem fazed by this behavior. So before he could do me any harm, I pulled on his hair, and while he was distracted, I ran to my next class. Periods 2, 3, 4 and 5 all went well, but which could be because I didn't mutter a peep. Then came lunch. I had 20 minutes to spare until it was my turn to eat, so I found a bench and tried to listen to music in peace. But it was as if the building didn't like that. I saw many things out of the corner of my eye, ranging from someone waving to me who wasn't actually there, to a kid performing what looked like a ritual of candles floating around him. My mind was now slowly turning against me, it seemed. Finally, after what felt like forever, it was my turn to eat. I got my soup and my chocolate bar as promised and sat down. As soon as I touched my seat, the food changed. The soup turned from a nice beige colour to blood red. I tasted it, and sure enough it had the metallic twang that human blood does. That's when I turned on my chocolate bar, still in the wrapper. I opened it to reveal what looked to be the same baby blue eyes from the friendly boy earlier. I nearly screamed, but I didn't want any more attention than I already had. So I pretended everything was normal. I quickly gulped down the blood so my eyes didn't end up like the poor boy's, and I pinched my nose whilst praying for forgiveness and ate the eyes in one bite. They tasted oddly sweet. I then put my tray away and waited for the bell while struggling to process what had just happened. When the bell chimed to signal the next period, I couldn't find the man with the green hat anywhere. I asked many people, all of them claiming they had no clue what I was talking about. So I ran. I had to leave what could be my life up to chance that I picked the right door. I ran through the hallway until I thought I saw a thing of green through the door. I ran in and sat down, silently praying I got the right class. We got 10 minutes through the class with my guards slowly lowering until I was apparently being disruptive and got asked to see the teacher outside. So I packed my bag, walked outside and looked around. Everything seemed normal until I noticed the roof was slowly closing in. I rubbed my eyes thinking they were playing tricks on me, but they weren't. So I ran until I saw a door. I barged in and the whole class looked at me. I stared at the nearest clock. I counted from 1 to 12 and let out a sigh of relief, knowing I was safer now. Finally, it came to period 7. I was still shaking. I followed nameless man to the next class, and it went by in a flash. I thought I was in the clear until I remembered rule number 9. I had to hide, and quickly. I found the toilets and looked for anything to help. I saw some vents, so I opened it up and popped in. I crawled until I saw the main hallway underneath. I had made it about halfway through this game until I saw red liquid starting to pour out of the walls. It was slowly filling up the corridors, yet no one seemed to notice. I looked around and saw the old, almost falling apart grandfather clock with an old man standing next to it. I had to sacrifice my hiding spot to tell him, but the halls were already ankle deep in blood, so I popped open the hatch and slowly found my way down. I saw the corridor he was in and quickly looked from side to side to see if I was clear. I ran down the hallway with my feet drenched in blood. I got to him and notified him of the problem. He thanked me. I went to his closet to pick some items up. But I'd made too much noise on this expedition. I knew I didn't have much time to hide. That's when I heard it. Started off with faint footsteps, but eventually turned into a full-on sprint with heavy breathing. It was him, the 7-foot-tall monster of a man. I should have run quicker, but instead I was intrigued by his features. He had pitch-black eyes and holes where his nose and ears should be. What freaked me out most was when I looked where his mouth should be. But instead there was a patch of smooth skin like his lips had been sewn together. With not much time left until he got to me, I turned and ran. I ran faster than I ever knew I could. I spent the rest of this twisted game running at speeds I never knew I could achieve. I took a right, a left and another right until I saw a door leading to a class I could hide in. I ran down and tried to open the door. It wasn't a push or a pull. I turned around quickly to run back and I saw him blocking the exit. He slowly walked over to me, every step getting louder and louder. He was taking his time as if to taunt me. I screamed for help, but no one could hear me. That's when the bell rang. I cried tears of joy to have survived this horrid day. I ran to the doors marked exit, slammed them open and jumped down the stairs. I ran as fast as I could to get to the gates, but then they slammed shut. I turned around confused to see the principal. I went up to him and asked, "What's happening?" It was then that my body froze in place, and I remembered rule number 10. I'd failed. I asked him what was going to happen to me. He failed to give me an answer, but I saw a shortened man with a green hat on. He came up to me and thanked me for freeing him. I was confused, until I started growing. I grew until I was 7 foot tall, and I felt my nose and ears cave in on themselves and my mouth seal over. It was then that the principal finally talked. He muttered, "It is your turn now," while placing a green baseball hat on my head. I am able to regain consciousness over this body sometimes, but I'm rarely able to control it for more than 5 minutes. and I'm now spending most of my life in the backseat of my own body, waiting for another poor soul to apply to this school. A low rumble in my stomach signalled the daily return of one of my greatest struggles: dark chocolate. I've noticed that the craving seems to have its own inconvenient schedule. It always kicks in at around 11 o'clock p.m. This bad habit is why I frequent the creepiest and most awkward grocery store in town. For some reason, I only buy one bar of chocolate at a time. I tell myself that each bar will be the last, at least for a while. But almost every night, I give in to temptation and go to Ponce Market. It's the only grocery store in my hometown that stays open past 11. Unfortunately, it does not have a self-checkout, and I'm forced to engage in a few minutes of uncomfortable small talk with the cashier. I've come to accept this is a fair punishment for my nightly walk of shame. However, my most recent trip has me considering swearing off dark chocolate forever. Last Friday night, I was once again walking under the bright fluorescent lights with my favourite brand of organic dark chocolate in hand. Despite the mild shame that always accompanies me on this errand, I was in good spirits. I had big plans of going back to my apartment, pouring a glass of wine and reading a book under my absurdly heavy-weighted blanket. That might sound like a lame Friday night for a 23-year-old single woman, but what can I say? I'm an old soul and a bit of a nerd. I was so absorbed in thinking about the relaxing night ahead of me that I didn't even look at the old lady at the register until she'd scanned my only item. "Is that all for you?" she said with a heavy accent. I could place it immediately. It was Castilian. My family is originally from Spain, and we go back to visit every summer. "Yes, that's all, thank you. If you don't mind me asking, are you from Spain?" "Yes, I am, but I moved here when I was a young girl, much like you are now," she said. "Why did you move here? I wish I could move to Spain. It's so romantic there." "Believe me, the grass is always greener on the other side. It doesn't matter where you're at. What matters is youth and beauty, and you have both in spades," she said. "That's very sweet of you, thank you. Don't let them slip away from you, or one day you'll be on my side of the counter." "Nonsense. You're beautiful. Don't talk about yourself like that." No, it's true. I'm old and withered. When a flower is full of life, it's proudly displayed for all to see. But when it fades and droops to the ground, it's tossed out and forgotten. It's just the way of the world. You're making me sad. There's more to life than just being young. Only someone who is in full bloom could say such a thing. Youth is all there is. It's life expressed as it should be. I struggled to find a response to her as I found myself edging closer to the door. I don't mean to drone on about being a sad old lady. These ideas just run in my blood, I guess. Believe it or not, some of my ancestors came to America in search of the Fountain of Youth a long time ago. Wow, that's interesting. I wish they'd found it. I'd take a drink. Maybe you can. What do you mean? Don't let me keep you if you need to go. I just kind of get lonely up here during the late shift. No, I'm in no rush, I said. I don't usually like talking to strangers this much, but she had honestly piqued my interest. Well, the house I live in was passed down to me from my parents. Their great-grandparents left it to them after they died. That's why my parents moved here in the first place. That house is one of the oldest in town. My ancestors built it by hand. Anyways, a few months ago I was having some remodeling done, and the construction crew discovered something unexpected during demolition. One of the floorboards in the living room was hollow. It always sounded funny when you'd step on it, but I never imagined it to be anything more than just another sound an old house makes. "What was inside it?" I asked. I'd completely forgotten about my chocolate at this point. My family's crest was on the bottom of the board, and inside was a letter written in Spanish to Queen Isabella, signed only by the name Gabrielle. He said he'd found the Fountain of Youth. I don't know who Gabrielle was, but obviously that letter never found its way to the Queen. That's incredible. Have you looked for it? You should tell someone. This sounds like something that would be on TV. Yes, I've looked for it, and between you and me, I found it. Where is it? Believe it or not, it's beneath this store. That's why I got this job, so I could keep watch up here, while my nephew took care of the location and excavation of the entrance. You're kidding, right? No, I'm telling you the truth. In a utility closet in the basement is the entrance to a tunnel that leads to an underground pool. My nephew was able to locate the void by drilling holes in the walls and using some kind of instrument that contractors use to test compaction. Just last week, he found it. He knocked down the wall, dug a few feet, and there it was. He built a hidden door in the wall of the utility closet to keep it hidden. I feel like this is some kind of practical joke, but I'll play along. Did you drink out of it? No, I haven't. I'm sure it's just superstition, but there were other things down there too. Words carved into the walls and a sizable amount of gold. As she said this, she pulled a Spanish doubloon out of her purse and handed it to me. I turned it over in my hand, feeling the weight of it. Would you like to see the fountain? She asked. Yes, I would. My gut was screaming at me not to go, but let's be honest. I have a hard time overcoming the temptation of chocolate, much less buried treasure. I followed the old woman downstairs and she led me to a closet door at the far corner of the basement. Just as she'd said, there was a hidden entrance built into the back wall. She pushed it and the whole thing swung inwards. I was stunned. I got out my phone and flipped the light on. She did the same with hers, and we walked inside. The air was cool and surprisingly fresh, but I could feel the humidity increase as we walked down a gentle curling slope. The narrow tunnel suddenly opened into a large circular room, and my light shimmered off the surface of a small pool at the center of it. The water had a strange yellow tint that grew in intensity as I shined my light directly into it. Gold coins lined the bottom of the pool. This is amazing, I said. You can have some of the coins if you want, but you'll have to jump in to get them. Something in the tone of her voice made me hesitate. This didn't make any sense. Why had she really brought me down here? If her and her nephew already knew about the gold, why would they leave it in the bottom of the pool? I took a step back and my heel landed on someone else's foot. Long, skinny fingers grabbed my shoulders and pushed me towards the water's edge. "What are you doing? Stop!" I yelled. I leaned back into them with all my strength, but it wasn't going to be enough. The water was inching closer. I remembered that my purse was hanging on my shoulder. I fumbled through it, thanking God for an overprotective dad. He'd insisted that I keep a taser with me everywhere I go. In one quick motion, I pulled it out of my purse and jammed it into the assailant's ribcage. I pulled the trigger and the man grunted as his grip loosened. I was able to duck to the side, and as I did, the man tripped over my feet and fell forwards into the pool. I assumed it would be her nephew, but he was much older than I had expected. The old woman screamed and lunged at me, so I tased her too. She went rigid and fell backwards, knocking herself out onto the stone floor. I looked back at the old man in the water and was horrified to see his transformation. He'd aged 30 years in a matter of seconds. His sunken, helpless eyes stared into mine as they grew cloudy and still. He continued to shrivel away and rapidly mummified until all that was left were clean white bones that sunk into the bottom of the pool. I ran to the entrance of the tunnel, where my cell service returned, and called the police. While I waited for them to get there, I remembered the engravings that the old lady had mentioned. I ran back down to the pool and found them on the stone wall. They were in Spanish, which I can't read very well, so I took a picture and put them into Google Translate when the police finally let me go home. The engravings read as follows: "The fountain is not what it seems. It is cursed. It can't replenish youth. All it can do is transfer it. If a man gets in the pool, his life is stolen from him. And if another man drinks from the pool, he takes the stolen youth for himself. Even this is not as it seems. Drinking from the fountain changes a man. You become crooked, youthful in appearance, but corrupt of heart. I know it sounds crazy, but please help me. Everyone I know has told me that I'm crazy, that my pregnancy is going to my head, that I'm perfectly healthy. Every doctor has brushed me off as a maniac, but I know it. I know that I'm right. I have been married to my husband, Jake, for 5 years. We dated for 3 years before that. He has been the most perfect guy ever. He's charismatic, wise, and has the most gorgeous smile. We lived together, and about 8 months ago, I realized I was pregnant. Jake was way more excited than me, and I remember him taking me into his arms and telling me that being a dad was all he ever wanted. I was excited too, of course. We've been trying for kids for years, and honestly, I was thinking it was never going to happen. The news was like a gift from God, if you believe in that kind of stuff. Anyway, ever since Jake has been taking care of me, he's been extremely careful about everything. He makes every single meal, he's extremely gentle with every touch, and overall, he treats me like a queen. The problem began when he started to get a little more restricting. When I wanted to go out with friends, he was always there with me to make sure I didn't do anything stupid. When I wanted to exercise, he would refuse. He would tell me that it could hurt the baby. When I drank anything, even water, he had to make sure he was pouring it so I didn't sneak alcohol in. He always wanted me in bed, watching TV, staying online, and sleeping. Often, times I'd refuse and insist on some alone time to go out, but that made him unusually angry. He would scream at me to stay put. He never had a temper before this, and I think the repeated yelling is what drove me to insanity. So, while he went to pick up some groceries, I snuck out. I know, it sounds crazy. Why does a grown woman have to sneak out of her own apartment? I went to my friend Mia's house for some fresh air. Since Jake had the family car, I ended up walking. She lived in our neighborhood, so thankfully it wasn't that bad. I turned off my phone, knocked on her door, and readied myself. It was the first time I've spoken to anyone without Jake around since my pregnancy. She and I talked, laughed, danced to music, and played games for what felt like hours. Eventually, though, I had to go home. Mia drove me back, and the drive could not have been shorter. Jake was, of course, furious. He questioned where I was, what I did, and why I couldn't have taken him with me. He pushed me against the wall and called me so many names. I remember him gripping onto my throat with such force that I could barely breathe. My vision was blurry, and I began crying. He demanded I go to the doctor's office the next day to ensure that the baby was healthy. I begged for him to let me go, and he eventually did. He was in shock at himself, and he avoided me for the rest of the night. The day after, he apologized. He told me he was angry and he never meant to lash out. Stupidly enough, I forgave him. He took me to the hospital to get checked. Nothing was out of the ordinary, except for the fresh bruises lining my neck. Then, something unexpected happened. The man I fell in love with resurfaced. It was like everything changed that night. No more yelling, no more anger. Every time he hands me my drinks or my food, he gives me the sweetest smile. It's like everything from the past few months has been nothing but a nightmare. My perfect husband came back. But something even weirder has been happening lately. This time, it's with me. I'm so tired all the time. I can barely move my body and I sleep for almost 18 hours a day. I wake up, Jake feeds me some more food and gives me something to drink. I watch TV and stay on the phone for a bit, then fall asleep again. I know a lot of people are sleepy during pregnancy. I know motivation for things can go away randomly. But this? No one should be sleeping the entire day away. I've read so many articles and nothing expresses tiredness like this. It feels artificial in a way. I don't know if that makes sense. Typing this out has been exhausting, and I'm only praying these words are coherent. Additionally, The baby has been kicking, and something about it feels off, unnatural. You know how they say a mother always knows? Well, I know something's wrong. Sometimes I feel something beyond kicking in my stomach. It feels like claws scratching at my inner belly, and the pain wakes me up at random intervals. Jake has gotten so used to me waking up screaming that every time I wake up, he's sitting on the edge of my bed, glass of water in hand. It's been like this for the past few weeks. A week ago, when I was awake, I demanded to go to the hospital. He took me, but the doctor said nothing was wrong. The baby was healthy and so was I. The blood work I requested came back normal. I voiced my concerns to the doctor and he looked at me as if I was clinically insane. He told me physical pain and tiredness is normal. He doesn't understand. Jake has been heavily monitoring my texts and notifications these days, so I can't really tell my friends much. Even if I did, I feel as though they would laugh it off. I tried talking to my husband about it, but he simply stated that this is normal, that I'm just going through a hormonal change, and it's taking a toll on my health. But it's more than that. I swear he's poisoning me. I swear the thing brewing in my stomach is not my baby. A mother knows, and I know it. I'm going to go back to sleep. I'll edit this post when I wake up again. I hope someone can give me some advice. Any recommendations, any help. Edit 1. Hi, I just woke up about 20 minutes ago. It's been 10 hours now and I'm so grateful for all the comments and suggestions. For everyone saying that this is abuse, I know it is. I want to seek help, but I'm too tired to do anything. I can't get out of bed. I can move, but everything's stiff and overall I feel extremely weak. I want to escape, to run away, but I simply can't get out of bed. Calling a hotline is pointless. He wants to listen to all my conversations. Going on an abuse website is pointless. He has access to all my accounts. Additionally, my parents are out of the question. My mum passed just over a year ago, and my dad wants nothing to do with my grandchild. I think he's too lost in mourning to want to do anything with myself or my baby. Now that I tackled the comments, here is an update. I first woke up about 3 hours ago, screaming. Honestly, there wasn't anything unusual about that except for the short amount of time I'd slept. Jake was the first one to discover why I woke up so early. The moment he heard the scream, he came rushing in. He told me that because I'd only slept 7 hours instead of my usual 15 to 17, he wasn't prepared with my water. He ran to the bedside to help me, to calm me down, to help me relax. I guess that was when he noticed the stickiness of my shirt. As for me, I was too busy screaming to notice. The pain felt unbearable and I didn't know what was going on. According to him, there were 3 thin gashes on my stomach, and he tried to treat it as I fought him, crying hysterically. In all honesty, what happened in this time felt like a blur, so I'm simply retelling what Jake told me. He said other things as well, but I can't say with confidence that it didn't happen. My head is blurry, but it isn't that blurry. As we speak, I'm lying in bed, in more pain than I've ever experienced throughout my entire life. I keep hearing these voices, repeating in my head that this baby was a mistake and that I need to get rid of it. The voices keep telling me that the thing in my stomach is a monster, that my husband is forcing me to lie here in my own misery. The baby tried to kill me tonight. I know it. That has to be what happened. Those cuts? Those are the claws I felt before. It wants me dead. This is not my child. I'm going to relax for a bit and reply to some comments. I probably won't fall asleep for a few hours, so I'll try my best to remain active. I'll update if I find anything else out. Edit 2. There was a knife under my pillow. Did Jake plant that there? I'm freaking out. There was never a knife under my pillow before. Jake is calling me a madwoman, that I tried to kill my own child. He's saying that he knew I was insane the moment I started talking about a demon baby, but that he didn't think I could do this. He's pinning this on me. I didn't do anything. I've been asleep. Sleep that I am certain he caused, and in constant pain. Jake is going insane. I need to get away, but I don't know how. I'm so tired. I feel like I'm going to pass out any minute. I'm not crazy. I know what he did to me. I know this thing inside of me isn't a baby. I know it. I'm never wrong. Final edit. They are calling me insane. They're telling me I need to be locked up. They're saying I'm crazy. The police are against me. My friends are against me. Everyone is against me. Why can't they realize it wasn't my fault? Why can't they see what he did to me? Why do they believe him? I did nothing wrong. I did what I had to do to escape. The pain is maddening. No one believes me. They were expecting me to birth a monster. I tried reaching out to Mia like everyone told me to. I stopped caring about what my husband would do to me. But she said she cannot speak to me anymore after what I did. She said that Jake told her what happened. She said that she pitied me for the voices in my head. Nobody is listening to me. I have no one. Maybe that's why I did it. I was alone. Alone with a killer brewing in my stomach. The tiredness is getting worse. I feel so dizzy, but I haven't eaten or drank anything he gave me. I don't know what he's doing to me, but he's doing something. I'll figure it out. I'll prove to the world that I'm not insane. I did not murder my child. I simply killed the beast inside of me. I would never harm a baby. I have morals. I loved my unborn child dearly. I truly, genuinely did. I still do. But it turned into a demon. I did what I had to do to save myself and everyone else. After all, a mother knows best. The thud of the shoe on the hardwood floor was met with the satisfying crunch of exoskeleton. Izzy stopped to get her composure and cautiously peeled the shoe from the floor, hoping to find a very dead cockroach. And to her pleasure, the only thing under her shoe was a small mass of white organs and bits of exoskeleton. She grabbed the dead roach with the paper towel and tossed it in the trash without a second thought. All the roaches in the house had her on edge, but she continued working. They were just bugs. It was the antique feeling of the house that kept her going. It was old, 1800s kind of old. If you couldn't tell from the outside, the inside gave it all away. She began renovation a while back and it felt like trying to dust nature. But weeks had passed and slowly it started to look better. But one thing couldn't just be fixed. The roaches. They were everywhere. It was hard not to stumble on one of them or their trail. If they weren't crawling on the walls or in the pantry, the empty husk of a cockroach was usually laying around. A hollow reminder that she would never get rid of them, only learn to live with them. The roaches were what almost made her quit the house. She had a massive fear of roaches since she was a kid. Every night when she was young, she would hear roaches crawling in the walls, the slight patter of their feet on the drywall. She would run to her parents' room almost every night, crying, but they called it off as her active imagination. Well, one night, one of the roaches fell right on her face. Never again did she see roaches in the same way. She always tried to convince herself that they were just bugs, but she couldn't. She couldn't forget it. The frantic scurrying and the everlasting fear and knowledge that they were there to stay. The sun slowly melted away into the horizon, marking the end of another hard day of work. But it wasn't over yet. She needed money to buy paint and some more tools. Izzy put away her tools and hopped into her small car. The small dirt road led to the highway, only a couple of miles from her house. It was a really old house, so not much renovation had been done before she'd gotten there, so the roads weren't exactly in the best condition. She pulled onto the desolate highway, her only company a few semi-trailers. She enjoyed the car rides because they were her time to think, her time to unwind. During the day, she didn't have much time as she was always working. She pulled down the small sun shield. It was a bright sunset and she was driving straight into it. The sunset reminded her of her family back in Arizona. She loved them. She knew she did, but they had a mixed relationship. She'd been planning to move and find a house of her own. As soon as they heard that she was planning to move up north, they started ghosting her. She didn't know why. She did nothing wrong. She tried contacting them, calling them multiple times, but no answer. Eventually, she stopped trying. It wasn't worth all that work. If they were going to ignore her, that wasn't her problem. She flicked on the turn signal and pulled into the small bank. It was almost dark by now and she was tired. The bank was closed, but a small ATM sat outside. She turned the car off. The silence was kind of creepy, like a horror movie. She walked over, slipped her card into the machine and typed in her PIN. She selected $100 and stood quietly, waiting for the cash to dispense. The subtle whir of the machine droned in the quiet parking lot. Swoosh. 20s quickly fitted out of the machine. It was almost all 5 when the large roach ran out along with the bill. She shot back in repulsion, screaming as she flung the bills into the air. In all the ruckus and confusion, it flew away, disappearing into the dark. She calmed herself down and picked up the bills. She stared at the ATM and shuddered. How on earth did a roach get in there? It was now completely dark, with only the glow of the moon and the light of the bank walls to illuminate the parking lot, and she got back into her car, wanting desperately to go to sleep, to forget this whole mess. The next morning, she got back to work on the house, carefully scraping off old paint and reapplying new paint. This process continued far into the evening, and at the end of the day she had yet to finish the painting, but she was close. In another day or so the house would look as good as new, well, at least on the outside. It was late at night and the glow of the moon slightly lit up her room. Izzy lay in her bed staring at her phone. She was going through her contacts, but when she saw her parents, all the pain flooded back. She sighed and set her phone down. It had almost been 3 months since they spoke, and when they did, it wasn't a very pleasant conversation. They argued bitterly, tossing insults back and forth, threatening to never speak to each other ever again. She didn't really mean it, but she wasn't so sure if they did. She stared into the dark room. Tears began to form and rolled down her cheek. She wiped her eyes, turned off the lamp and fell asleep to a soft whisper of the wind. Neon red numbers shone through the pitch black. 2:01. The moon still shone brightly outside the small window. Izzy was asleep, her quiet breathing the only noise in the room. As the clock turned 2:02, a small shape crept from a box on the floor. Its small body perked up, antenna flittering in the air as if smelling it, and crawled out onto the floor. Izzy rolled over and groped at a pillow, but to much dismay, felt a small creature frantically scurrying up her arm. She leapt up with almost superhuman speed and started screaming and flailing her arms wildly. She ran to the light switch and frantically flipped it on. Her heart was pounding. She could hear the pulse in her head. She looked around for the roach. She knew it was a roach. It had to be, but she didn't see anything. She flopped down on a chair, wishing that she would never see another roach again. That night, she decided to sleep on the couch, away from the roach in her room, and with the comfort of the TV, maybe she'd feel better. As she shuffled down the stairs, she noticed a bite mark on her arm. It was quite large, and unlike any bite mark she'd ever seen before. She poked it, which was followed by a howl of pain as it burned like fire. She grabbed some bandages and medicine from the bathroom and cleaned up the bite. It burned like hell, but at least it was clean now. She didn't want an infection, those were horrible. With the wound clean, she plopped on the couch, exhausted from the day's work and the cockroaches. Tomorrow, she decided, I'm going to hire an exterminator. With the dim flicker of the TV, she fell asleep once again. Izzy groggily sat up. She wiped her eyes and reached for her phone. After a few unsuccessful attempts, she got it. She groggily glanced at the caller, most likely a scammer. She looked and almost had a heart attack. It was Mum. Stunned, she just stared. After a couple of seconds, she snapped out of it and answered. "Hello?" Izzy responded with the taint of sleep in her voice. "Hey, honey, how's it going?" "Good. You called after all this time?" "Yes." she said slowly. Your father still hasn't gotten over the whole scuffle, but I didn't want to hold a grudge. What's the point? Yeah, you're right, Izzy said, her tone starting to sound happier. She stood up and cleaned up the couch, picking up all the pillows. They talked for a while, maybe an hour or two, but eventually Izzy had work to do. Okay, Mum, thanks for checking in, love you. A small smile grew on her face and she set the phone down. Before she looked away, she noticed something moving on the phone. A pair of small antennae flicking back and forth. She knew exactly what that was. Horrified, she had had enough. She was going to kill this roach. She grabbed a small hammer sitting in the toolbox and slowly approached the phone. Once she was close enough, she reared back and started smashing. Pieces flew all around the room. The roach sprinted out of the broken phone as soon as it had the chance, and Izzy chased it. It ran towards the kitchen, moving as fast as its tiny legs could go. She grabbed the fly swatter and slowly stalked towards the roach. It was crawling on the wall, searching for a small crack or opening to get through. She reared back and swung on the wall. When she peeled the swatter away, it wasn't there. She peered closer and saw a small crack. It couldn't have, she thought, but she knew it had. That was the only place it could have gone. There was only one place that crack led to. It was the basement. Dread overtook her. What if she found a nest? She shivered at the thought. She searched for a can of bug spray. As if that'll do anything, she thought. But she tried bug spray many times before, but they just crawled away, as if she was spraying them with water. But it was worth a try. With a can of bug spray and the fly swatter, she made her way to the door. It stood looming over her, teasing her. She thought about turning back. She could just buy a new house. No, that was too expensive, and she'd already put too much money and effort to back down just because of a stupid bug. After finally mustering up the courage, she grabbed the door handle and began the descent into the abyss. The cold air pricked up against her skin. Small goosebumps rose, but she didn't know if it was because of the temperature or her fear. She flicked on the flashlight. A small beam shone in front of her. It provided comfort, but it wasn't very helpful. There were lights, but they weren't wired yet, so they were no help at all. With every step, she could feel her heart pounding harder and harder. At last, she got to the bottom. The floor was covered in dust and riddled with dead insects, wood chips and other debris. She shuffled along, listening to the crunch of exoskeletons under her feet and scanning the walls with her flashlight, hoping to catch the cockroach, or even find the nest. She crept along, nervously snapping in the direction of any subtle noise. As she neared the old washing machine, she saw it. It was on the wall, lying still. She popped the lid on the can and crept closer. It was close enough, and she lunged towards it, spraying wildly. She missed, however, only spraying the wall. She turned and watched it fly into the darkness of the other side. She muttered curses under her breath and made her way to the other side. This side was somehow darker and creepier than the other side. Boxes lined the walls and old cans of paint scattered the floor. The familiar noise of wings fluttering caught her attention. She listened in. Once she had an idea of where the thing was, she leapt forward. The cockroach was on the ground, right next to what appeared to be the nest. All Lizzie could see was a lot of movement, but she couldn't see the shape. She pointed the flashlight towards the nest. It wasn't just a nest, however. It was a body. She dropped the flashlight and ran, screaming harder than she ever had. She rounded the stairs, but something was at the top. In the doorway, the figure of a man stood motionless. His face had roaches crawling all over it, and his eyes and mouth were filled with them. He didn't even seem to move on his own, but the roaches moved for him. His skin writhed with roaches like they were under his skin. Izzy screamed and went to turn the other way, but before she could get away, a hand covered her mouth. She tried to scream, but the cockroaches flooded her mouth. She could feel them crawling into her, deep in her lungs and down her throat. She stood and started to lose consciousness. Before it all went black, she saw the face of the man from the stairs. He was standing in front of her now. It was her father, or what appeared to be him. Stars began to twinkle in her eyes, and the last thing she ever saw was a roach-filled smile. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to support this channel, we have a link in the description for that. Don't forget to give a subscribe, a like, and press the bell to get notifications. Tell us your thoughts in the comments section. You can also send us your real or fictional horror stories.